good evening, a very good evening and a warm welcome on behalf of Indo-British Scholars Association and iLEAD. This is the first session being convened with Mr. Rajive Kaul as President of IBSA, an integral part of the Association of British Scholars. IBSA is a group of individuals who have benefited from a UK education or have worked there, or also corporates with a UK Connect. I also wanted to acknowledge the iLEAD team under the dynamic leadership of the father-daughter duo, Mr. Pradeep Chopra and Pragya Chopra, for working tirelessly behind the scenes for presenting this webinar. So can the dragon and the elephant truly dance together? What would be the achieved footsteps in alignment? What about pace, dynamics, trust involved? I can't wait to hear the conversation between Mr. Tarun Das and Mr. Rajive Kaul on the intriguing topic for this evening. We have some very special guests who will be joining us to ask questions and share their perspectives. You are also invited to send in questions using the chat button. Do that right through the session, and we will try and get to a few of those towards the end of the session. With that, it is now my great privilege and honor to introduce Mr. Tarun Das. Described as a man well ahead of his times, praised for his dauntless entrepreneurial spirit and his belief that nothing is impossible to achieve. Most of you know him as the driving force behind CII from its very inception in the 60s to 2004 when he retired. As Director General, it remained as Chief Editor. Mr. Das has a close connect with Kolkata. With being a St. Xavier student and also beginning his working life in 1963 with the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, deputed to the Indian Engineering Association, which later became CII. He has a strong UK connect too. A graduate from University of Manchester. I'm told he's an ardent fan of Manchester United. He holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Warwick and has been conferred an honorary CBE by Her Majesty, the Queen of England, for his contribution to Indo-British partnership. Mr. Das is currently the chairman of the Institute of Economic Growth and chairs the Sasakawa Inter-Literacy Foundation. He's also on the board of a host of other prominent nonprofit institutions. He has been working tirelessly on deepening international ties and chairs several strategic dialogues and bilateral commissions. A Padma Bhushan holder for outstanding contribution in the field of trade and industry, Mr. Das has also received the Singapore National Award, Sweden Royal Order of the Polar Star, Order of the Rising Sun, for strengthening Indo-Japan relations. The list is very long and truly very impressive. I personally enjoyed reading the book authored by him on the story of CII, aptly named Crossing Frontiers. A great orator, astute, with an amazing ability to connect with people at all levels, especially the youth. I am truly fortunate and privileged to have him as my mentor. In conversation with Mr. Das will be Mr. Rajive Kaul, President of IBSA and Chairman of Nicco Engineering Services. Mr. Kaul has graduated from Imperial College London and was awarded a gold medal in recognition of his outstanding contribution. He is Honorary Consul General of the Republic of Korea and was the recipient of the Order of Diplomatic Service Medal from the South Korean President and Prime Minister. He's also of XIMB, XLADA, boards of IIM, Ahmedabad and Kolkata. He has worked very closely with Mr. Tarun Das during his days as former president of CII. And before I hand over to him, I have a very brief but funny story to share. Bali, 1996. At a CII visit, Mr. Kaul looked at the old battered Bata shoes worn by Mr. Tarun Das and suggested they be given a quiet burial in the trees of Bali. What he didn't know was that those shoes had come to symbolize good luck and all that went well at CII. Raji, do you want a good year as president of CII? More than anything else in the world. In that case, we better preserve those shoes. Mr. Kaul thereafter committed himself to looking after the welfare of those shoes, which I am told survived 2004 and well beyond. Such was the camaraderie and partnership between the two of them. With that, over to you, Mr. Kaul.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ritashri, and a very warm welcome to you, Tarun. What a pleasure. What a pleasure for me. I think I've been at least 100 times sharing a dais with you in the old days. You know, you taught me how to propose the vote of thanks. You taught me how to give the welcome address. You taught me how to give a keynote address. You also taught me the art of giving a 40-slide presentation within 10 minutes to Lee Kuan Yew, as also to the president of Brazil, I think it was. And that is a really tough task. But anyway, it's great to be back with you, Tarun. Unfortunately, it's virtual, but that's the new norm, and perhaps it's going to be a future norm as well. Well, anyway, to everyone, in one word, Tarun is my guru, right? I'm very happy to say that he has changed my life. He's changed my perception. And really, he's also taught me as to what IAS is and how to deal with people in IAS, let alone others who are ministers and presidents, both of India and overseas. But I think, Tarun, you always believe in diving in to the topic. Well, the topic is Dance of the Dragon and the Elephant, Intricate Footsteps and India's Economic Dynamics. So, Tarun, if I may mention and in a way ask your views, that in 1993, both India and China had a very similar per capita income. I think it was US dollars 380. However, today, China's per capita is almost 10 times that of India. So tell me, Tarun, what did the dragon do right, which India couldn't quite get right? Over to you, Tarun.
Okay, before I answer your question, Rajiv, thank you for having me. You were my president 25 years ago, 1995, if you remember. And it was our centenary year. We had the centenary celebrations in Calcutta, and of course, Subodh Bhargava was president, and you were the vice president. And those were wonderful times. And you took over as president then, and we had a great year together. Of course, we ended the year on a dramatic note with a little bit of a spat between Ratan Tata and Rahul Bajaj in our executive meeting, if you remember. And you turned to me and said, now what do we do? And I said, close the meeting, you know, so that we can deal with each of them separately, and which we did. And that was the only time when you and I were on the cover of Business India magazine together, but looking in different directions. You remember that?
Very much so.
So that was a great time. And so thank you for taking me down memory lane with you. And thank you, Rita Sri, for that extended introduction, which I did not deserve. And I want to also take this opportunity right up front to thank IBSA and iLEAD leadership for having me today. Rajiv, as I heard, this is your first webinar after taking over as president. And may you be president for a very long time. Now, unlike the CII discipline of 1 year. So you asked about China and India. Let me refer to the title, The Dance of the Dragon and the Elephant. You know, the dragon in Chinese mythology was a sign of the power of the emperor of China. And when I think of the elephant and I think of the Maharajas of India, I often think of them, the imagery is the Maharaja riding on an elephant. But of course, the dragon is a snake on 4 legs. much faster, and an elephant, by its bulk, is much slower. They can't dance together. They can't mix together, though we wanted them to. We wanted actually to change the imagery many years ago. In a strategic dialogue meeting with the Chinese, I suggested that why don't we change the imagery to a Chinese panda and an Indian peacock? Because those are symbols of peace. Those are symbols of beauty. Those are symbols of friendship. But that's another story. It didn't happen. I think our systems are different. We have a completely different, chaotic, democratic, indisciplined system in India. They have a completely totalitarian, centrally directed system. So when they decide that they want to go somewhere, the leadership decides, they just go there. When our leadership decides that they want to go somewhere, and they did decide that in 1991, but there were so many stumbling blocks and so many hurdles. And if I remember, when you all are in Calcutta and I'm originally from there, Somnath Chatterjee, the very well-known member of parliament from Calcutta, he said to us once that if you open up the economy, you're going to sell out India. You know, and he was a power in parliament. He was a strong voice. So when there are many voices in the country, you automatically make haste slowly. You just can't move it faster. And that's the difference between Chinese system and the Indian system. They moved ahead fast. We moved ahead fast. Then we slowed down a little faster. We slowed down. So the whole process is different. But they have also slowed down, by the way, considerably. And I would hesitate to accept all the figures that are being churned out now, that they have got over COVID completely and they are back to high growth. I have doubts about that. So let me stop now and let's go on to the next question.
Well, Tarun, the next question is actually where you left off, because, you know, we are presently facing our worst economic year in the history, perhaps, of India. You know, and Q1, our decline was 23%. Various organizations, Goldman Sachs, they are suggesting that our decline this year will be 14.5%. Nomura is putting it 10.5%. ICRA is putting it at 9.5%, a decline. So how do you see the next 2 years? I mean, there should be a sharp growth, obviously, which follows a very sharp decline. You should get a sharp growth. But overall, most people are saying at the end of the next financial year, we'll still be not quite up to our previous finance year. What is your thinking on that?
So I'm not enamored of these figures being quoted by you and the figures which have been churned out by people, because they are referring essentially to April, May, June, the first quarter of the financial year. And we were completely locked down in April and May. So that's a very, very expected situation that in 2 months out of the 3, we are 100% locked down. So obviously the GDP growth rate is going to crash. So I think that's not the issue. When the lockdown was lifted in June, and I have connected with a number of people in industry over June and July and August. Orders have come back, Rajiv. Demand has come back. Growth has come back. I know of capital goods companies whose order books today are better than they were in 2019. And this is not just one company. There's a lot. So we mustn't get taken away by this April, May, June figures. Those are an aberration. Growth has come back, demand has come back, and we are moving ahead. And think of what's working for us. What tremendous capability and strength in technology and IT and telecom. And that's transforming the country. It's taking connectivity to every village in the country over the next year or two. I think it's going to be transformational. Telemedicine is happening. Tele-education is happening. I've been talking to Pratham, who are very big in primary education. And they have used the COVID challenge to reach out using the telephone to teach children, even in villages of India. So there is a whole, don't get enamored of, don't get carried away by GDP. There is something I would suggest to you as GDD, gross domestic development, more than just gross domestic product, GDP. We also see the orders that are coming now to industry, and the growth that is coming from the rural economy, Rajiv. So look at the next 2 years, you will see a huge growth coming from the rural economy as we go forward.
As they say, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar, Tarun. Aapke bhi, unfortunately, I'm stuck in our business with one amusement park, which is still under lockdown. It's 5 months. We are paying salaries and wages, etc. But, revenue is absolutely zero. And in our engineering company, we are back to about 70% of pre-closure level, because the mini lockdowns prevent our technicians from moving around.
Yeah.
That is a problem. But anyway, that is my personal experience. But like I said, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar, and I'm sure many of the steps and reforms that the government's taken will sort of start kicking in as we sort of progress from month to month. Furthermore, I'd say that there are certain sort of very positive signs in the economy, the IT being one, the pharma being the other, FMCG being a third, and jobs, lots of jobs are being created, Tarun, in these lines, right? But unfortunately, if I may talk about the jobs, this pandemic and the migrant labor, etc., moving away, there are various estimates that today we've lost about anywhere between 15 to 20 million jobs. I don't know what your take is on it. Plus, we need to add on 10 million jobs every year. So my question to you would be, what should be our strategy to keep employment going, to keep that momentum of giving jobs to A, the people who've lost their jobs, and B, the people who are joining the mainstream once they finish their school and colleges and perhaps do a little bit of skill development? How can they be brought into the mainstream?
I see a new wave in the country, and it's a wave of entrepreneurship. It's not just startups, which are in the area of technology, but there is also micro-entrepreneurship. There's small businesses growing. And let me give you one example, Rajiv, which is fact-based. There's an NGO called the Bharatiya Yuva Shakti Trust. I've been working for over 2 decades now. They assist disadvantaged people to set up businesses. I'll fast forward. 5,000 micro-entrepreneurs, mentored by people, mentors trained by BYST. 250,000 jobs have been created, Rajiv. Can you believe it? 250,000 jobs. So entrepreneurship is the way we are going to go. And young people want to do their own thing. They really don't want to work for you or me. For me, in our generation, it was look for a job. But today, they want to look for what they can do themselves. And it's amazing what's happening around the country. So entrepreneurship will make a change. And this entrepreneurship is going to reach even the rural areas, small towns. There is a leadership program for young women, which is done by the Ananta Aspen Center, supported by CK Birla, a senior member of CII. These women from small towns are all entrepreneurs. They're in the age group of 20 to 30. And their stories are amazing. And what they're doing, there is a girl in Gorakhpur who's building structures made of straw, which are green structures and are healthy structures and our strong structures. Just to give you an example. So the way to go forward is we are not going to get the jobs from manufacturing, because manufacturing is essentially going into automation, but the way is going to be new and new and new entrepreneurship at every level.
Thank you, Tarun. That's very interesting. And you pointed about the Bharatiya Yuva Shakti Trust, BYST. Since we are in the Indo-British sphere, you might like to tell them that this is emerged from the royalty making a visit to India. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It actually happened when President Venkatraman went to UK, and there was a dinner for him, I think, by the Queen, and his daughter Lakshmi was sitting next to the Prince of Wales. And they started talking, and the Prince of Wales talked about the Prince's Youth Trust in UK, which is helping disadvantaged young people to set up businesses. And that model was brought to India, adapted, implemented in partnership with CII and supported by CII. And it's been an amazing success story.
Yeah, thank you for pointing this out, because it's very dear to our heart, such stories where Indo-British partnerships are contributing to the economy, contributing to the jobs. So it's good to know that. Before I hand over to the get the panelists in, Tarun, my last question to you would be, you know, President Xi Jinping in the year 2017 stated, and I quote, "China has stood up and become strong and is now ready to take the central stage." Thereafter, their actions in a way started demonstrating this in a much larger fashion, be it Ladakh, be it the South China Sea, be it them lending huge monies to various countries, including Maldives. And when Maldives defaults on the repayment, they say, okay, we are taking one island in exchange of your loan. Be it in Africa, you know, they have a strong strategic interest in Pakistan, which in a way they've bought over with their very large amount of doses of funding they've given. They're now moving into Nepal and influencing them. Their Belt and Road Initiative, they want to influence as much of the world as they can, right? So they're doing all this. Now, from India's perspective, what do you think we should be doing in a way, I won't say necessarily to counter this, but to ensure ourselves, to protect ourselves, to secure our future, to secure our security? Over to you.
So the first part of what you said about what they're doing, let me say that they're also losing goodwill, because they're coming on too strong with the smaller countries of Asia and Africa, and perhaps also Latin America. We are getting a lot of feedback of countries pushing back on China. They don't want to be controlled. Many of these countries, like us, have been under colonial rule for hundreds of years. They don't want another colonial rule. So they are distancing themselves gently. Initially, they thought Santa Claus had arrived at their doorstep. Later, they realized Santa Claus was wielding a big stick, and they've started withdrawing. This is happening right across the world, Rajiv. So many of those countries are turning to India for assistance, and we will be able to assist on a much smaller way because we don't have those resources of China. But our relationships, our partnerships are based on helping those countries to build their own capacity. That's one. As far as we are concerned domestically, we have to do one thing very, very seriously, that is build economy, build economy, build economy, and allow the private sector to lead. Privatize the public sector. We have to privatize the public sector. You've got to trust the private sector, because the entrepreneurship of the private sector is efficient, it's competitive. And many private sector companies have now invested globally and are doing very well. India has inherited a mistrust-based system from the British, and we are continuing that mistrust-based system. We've got to move to a trust-based system, and we've got to trust the private sector so that the economy can grow much, much faster. And that includes the public sector banks, by the way, which need to be privatized. On the strategic side, we have to, unfortunately, keep on building our defense forces, our defense capability, and we'll have to go on. Mr. Shekhar Datta sent me a wonderful video this morning of what our soldiers are doing right up at the top of the Himalayas and what they are going through. Our soldiers are very well trained. And if we lost 20 people, soldiers' lives in Galwan, I am told from my friends in China, they lost 100. We know how to fight, Rajiv, and we can fight.
Good, Tarun. That's encouraging words all the way through, and that's a very good message, particularly for our younger people who have to see the future of a strong and vibrant India. I would now like to move over to the first of our panelists, Dr. Jamshed Irani. He's a Padma Bhushan. He was conferred the honorary knighthood by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. He's worked along with you, Tarun, a lot in building the IBPI, Indo-British Partnership Initiative. He's pretty much a career Tata Steel and then Tata Group man. He's also a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Jamshed, perhaps you would like to ask Tarun the next question. Can we unmute Dr. Irani?
Dr. Irani,
you have to unmute him.
We can't, he'll have to do it himself.
Jamshed, can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
absolutely.
We can hear you.
Okay. I would just like to take Tarun back to 1991, when India opened up for the first time. I was that time chairman of CII or CEI. Tarun was, of course, Director General. And the two of us went and met the then Prime Minister, Narasimha Rao. Do you remember that, Tarun?
Yes, Jamshed.
Yeah. And he told us that give me 3 years of unstinted support from industry. You know, by that time we had taken a $5 billion loan from the IMF. Our goal had been taken away to Geneva or London or somewhere. He said, give me 3 years of unstinted support from industry, and I'm sure we will be able to turn this country around. He had as his colleagues Manmohan Singh, who was finance minister, and Chidambaram, who was the
Commerce Minister.
Commerce Minister. And the three of them, along with industry, the difference between then and now is that it was a united government and industry was fully supportive. I'm sure industry is still fully supportive, but the goings on in Delhi leave me to doubt where the government and the opposition are united. That time we had people like Vajpayee and others in the opposition, and they totally supported the government. The point I'm trying to make is it was a united Indian effort. Can we say that we have the same type of attitude now? I doubt it. And only just now, it's not that there is it's not just the opposition in Delhi. There are oppositions everywhere. In Bengal you have it, in Maharashtra you have it, anywhere you look, everywhere the country is not united. And our energies are being wasted in fighting small local battles rather than combining together and fighting international battles with China or whoever. That is the difference. So I think one thing which the industry can do now is to use its influence and get all the political parties if not united, at least looking in the right direction. Just now, everyone is looking after their own interests and they're looking all over the place. Whether you call it the elephant or the peacock, we are not moving together in the same direction. So I would like to ask Tarun, what is it that we need to do, industry and government and bureaucracy, to make the country run in the same direction as we had done in 1991?
First of all, Jamshed, in the 73 years of independence that we've had, about 60 years or so, the governance has been with a Congress party or a Congress-led coalition. So the systems, processes, policies, by and large, starting from 1947, were set in motion at that time and have by and large continued except for that very big break in 1991. So up from 47 to 1990, everything was controlled, managed, decided by the government. Private sector had very little to do. Even your Air India, which Tata set up, was nationalized. Banks were nationalized. Insurance was nationalized. This was all done at that time. And we are suffering now from sick banks and sick other public sector companies, which were all set up at that time. So the legacy has been a very, very tough legacy for India. And we have to get out of that legacy. Privatization in a small way has started. Recapitalization of, and I think Indian industry, I'm far away now from the center of Indian industry. You all as past presidents of CII are, I'm sure, very much involved in policy discussions. I know that industry is very closely engaged with government. I hear that. I hear that from my friends in government. I hear that from my friends in industry, that CII at least is deeply engaged with government, is actually trusted and respected by government for the way that it has functioned, and very much following the same pattern that we did. Work in partnership, not in conflict, work together and work to build trust. We must remember that in 2014, there was a paradigm shift in the political leadership of our country. Completely new people came who are not from St. Stephen's College or Oxford or Cambridge or Imperial College or whatever. I mean, they are homegrown people from small towns, even from small villages. So their perception of India is very different and their aspirations may be very different. So they have just been in power for 6 years now. And they have depended very much on the civil servants, the bureaucracy, for delivery of their plans, their initiatives, and their policies. The question is the civil service up to it? Do they have the managerial capability to do that? Are they great implementers? Or are they really what they were trained to do, to control, to regulate, to administer? So we are going through that transition now. And it's too early to pass judgment. But I know that the industry, at least CII definitely, from what I hear, is working very closely with government.
Yeah, and Tarun, let me tell you that Mayank Jalan, who's the president of Indian Chamber of Commerce, he'll be speaking a little later. But I know he's had 5 meetings with the finance minister, perhaps 20 meetings with Piyush Goyal. And he's had one detailed meeting where all of us were there with our prime minister, of course, all over video. But I mean, and there'll be many more, and I'm sure he'll talk about and explain to Jamshed how Indian Chamber is trying to partner with the government and be a very good bridge to the industry. But I know Rita Shri wanted to come in. Rita Shri, you wanted to bring someone else in. So can I quickly hand over to you?
Certainly, yes. If we may invite Mr. Pradeep Chopra, the chairman of iLEAD, to come in and ask a question. Mr. Chopra is going to be at a meeting later with the VC, so We were wondering if he could just join.
Yeah, please come in, Mr. Chopra.
Yeah, thank you, Ritashi, and thank you, Rajiv. Mr. Das, I agreed with you that, there is a paradigm shift which is happening right now. The rules of the game is changing. Before this pandemic, all of us were focusing on creating physical infrastructure, big campuses. And I come from real estate background, and I know the problem we all face, like the Rajiv was just now telling me about the entertainment park. Now there are hardly any visitors. Now you think of China, where the entertainment park is maybe 1,000 times bigger than Rajiv's. Now if he is having problem in paying salaries, think of them, how they are, even before pandemic, I had visited China and I had seen ghost cities and ghost shopping malls. There's no people. I mean, they have built huge infrastructure which was going unutilized or underutilized. Even most of their airports were running at a capacity of 25% or 30% of their rated capacity. Now with the drop in the traffic, they'll have a tough time in servicing, paying salaries or paying for its maintenance and replacement costs and all that. Thankfully, we had not invested so much in physical infrastructure. And our airports are running at 110% capacity. The Delhi airport, they don't even have one single extra slot if one extra aircraft wanted to land. I mean, I'm talking about pre-pandemic. Now that the traffic has come down, we still will be working at capacity utilization which are viable. And the whole shift is happening towards electronic infrastructure, the colleges and the school and the healthcare and the shopping. Everything is becoming electronically possible. People are working from home. So there's a less congestion on the roads. People are not traveling outside their cities. So there's less requirement of hotels. So more rooms are available for tourists. Suddenly the changing game, I think, is going to tremendously help India because we had a problem with creating physical infrastructure because there are land issues and the infrastructure projects get delayed because there are litigations in the land and all that. What's your take on this? That is this pandemic is a blessing in disguise for Indian vis-a-vis China? What is your take on this?
Well, Mr. Jalan.
Chopra.
Sorry, Mr. Chopra. I beg your pardon. The greatest strength of India over the last 10 to 15 years has been the services sector. And if you look back, you see that over 50% of our economy is the services sector, which is very people-centric and it is very information technology-centric. It's not concrete, it's not buildings, it's not structures. So this services sector has also taken a beating, but it will come back much faster because the level of investment, the scale of investment normally is much less than what you put into very big concrete structures. I think the ghost towns that you saw in China, and I have seen some ghost areas also in my visits to China, will only increase. Their idle capacity will increase because they have actually gone for overcapacity from the beginning. Why is the BRI idea? The BRI idea was to use their own capacity to export it, utilize it to build this global infrastructure. But country after country are resisting that BRI because they are realizing that they will eventually have to pay very high costs to the China companies for building that infrastructure. So I think we get caught at a particular point of time and we say, oh, we are way behind them and they are way ahead of us. They are, of course, way ahead of us. They're a much larger economy and they've done very well. But COVID is going to change everything for everybody, rich, poor, everybody. Actually, the poor may be better off. As I talked about the rural economy, I don't think the millions of people who fled the urban slums all of them are going to come back. I think many of them will stay with their families and their homes, and that will be good for their families, good for society, good for India. So as the time progresses, I think we will find that India's balance of power will definitely improve.
Thank you, Tarun. May I now request Subodh Bhargav, who was my senior also at CII. I trained under him as well. He's also the former group chairman of iShares, of Tata Communications, of GlaxoSmithKline Healthcare, and many other companies which he chaired and was on the board of. But to me, the most important was that of being a president of CII when I was his vice president. He also played a very active part and still does in Indo-British partnership, and goes regularly to the delegation every summer, other than this summer, to the UK. So Subodh, would you like to pose the next question to Tarun?
Thank you, Rajiv. Good evening, Tarun. It's
Hi.
great to see you after a long time, though we live close to each other.
Great to see you.
I must say that I'm very encouraged by your optimism, but I have some buts. You know, we are not to deal with only the dragon's dance in economy space, but also currently in military space. India's constraints on funding and not finding jobs are the two pain areas which we need not talk about just now. But I think to tackle this situation, our dependence on China as a part of the supply chain, very important, automotive, pharma, and many other sectors, and also to generate more jobs in the manufacturing sector to attract multinationals and others to manufacture in India instead of China and move their factories. My question to you, Tarun, is with that background, is this hype about boycott China going to help us in doing that? We are not going to get rid of China, either supply side or the market side or any other linkage overnight. So my suggestion and my question to you is, would it help if we change the narrative to talk about manufacturing moving from China to India to supplement the capacity, and similarly, Indian imports from China, don't talk about boycott, but talk about creating diversified sources, adding additional sources from other sovereignties if we can't do it within India. So I think the whole narrative changing, will it help us in dealing with the dance of the dragon?
Subodh, great to be with you. And I think our relationship also goes back to more than 25, 30 years.
It goes back to Calcutta AIEI.
That's right, yeah.
Raw Material Committee.
You know, what you have talked about is actually happening. There is a very serious, quiet effort to get into the global supply chain, to divert companies. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear me? Okay.
Sure.
Divert companies from China to India for manufacturing and supplies. It's happening. And the results will take some time because we don't have that true single window, one man to decide everything. You know, that doesn't happen here. So there is a process involved. I'll give you one example, for example, that we've been very deficient in semiconductor devices, in a semiconductor. And India has now progressed very far in discussions with another country to cover this lacuna in India. In the same way, private sector companies of America who were putting all their eggs in the Chinese basket are now looking at alternatives where to go for future investments and cutting down their own investments in China. Their first choice is Vietnam today. But Vietnam is a small country, so it has limited capability to absorb. But they're doing great. I mean, there's a huge foreign investment flowing in there. But they will soon reach saturation point. So I think you will find more and more companies coming here. And there is a serious effort for local companies. I'm associated with a British construction equipment company, JCB. We have been importing components and parts from different countries. The indigenization process has got a big fillip after COVID and after the conflict at the border.
Can I just take a second, Tarun? I agree with you, all this is happening. My question was that the rhetoric and the talk across the country, media and elsewhere about boycott China, if we change that narrative, will we get better results and faster results, apart from our use of doing business issues, which are internal? I agree with you. But why this narrative of confrontation unnecessarily?
Subodh, one of the negative points about India are our television channels and their evening programs. So that many of us have stopped watching the TV debates. So how do we control them? We can't. We are a free country that way. They say all kinds of things. And the boycott business is all coming as a drama from there. It doesn't mean anything and we should not take it seriously.
Okay, I take your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun and Subodh both. I now move to yet another former president of CII, Mr. Shekhar Datta, also an engineer from London. He sort of retired as the MD and president of Greaves Cotton. Then he was on several boards, including BHEL, IDBI, Vesuvius. He was also the chairman of the Bombay Stock Exchange for a period of time. But most importantly, we were together in CII and we worked together. I had the pleasure of working with him for 2 years. So over to you. Are you there, Shekhar? Hello?
Yeah, he's there.
Over to you.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Good to see you.
Okay, never mind. You don't have to see me on the video because I'm not that handsome like Rajive Kaul. But let me get back to the point that Subodh raised, and I would like to take off from there. Tarun, I would like to ask you your views as to whether we can really divorce economics from politics. And I'm talking not about politics, domestic politics, I'm talking about global politics. I am a bit, in a way, taken aback with the kind of aggressive postures that we're trying to take in various directions, which relates obviously to China for good reasons at the moment. But I think if you, Tarun, think back to 1996, I think we, and I was just about an understudy to you at that time, trying to take over the CIS as president. You're trying to teach me how to, take off from where Rajiv is going to leave. And I had suggested at that time that if China is our neighbor, Russia is our neighbor, India is, of course, very much there in Asia as a dominant country. Why is it not possible for these three big Asian, if I may call Russia as an Asian country, also to be somewhat like a European Union? And I think we in CII at that time had prepared a kind of a paper on this. It didn't take off for very good reasons, perhaps at that time, but I'm going back 23, 24 years ago. So my question really is, and if I may call you Dr. Das, which is what you are really, not Mr. Do you think that our foreign policies, irrespective of which government was in power at that time, has failed to bring India, Russia, and China together. We are still very close to Russia. In fact, Russia is acting like a medium for us to be closer to China, as it's recently happened with our foreign minister visiting Moscow. But is there something that we have failed in that direction in a foreign policy? And is there a possibility of that now being corrected to some extent? That's one part of my question and comment, if you like. And if I may just add one more with the permission of the President, Mr. Rajive Kaul, or the Chairman, Mr. Rajive Kaul. You know, I was reading an article recently by George Magnus and Hannah Bretherton, who are research associates of China Center in Oxford University. And in that, it was very clear that President Xi's philosophy, which is now part of the constitution in CCP, that there has to be a common destiny for emerging and developing countries, culminating in BRI. Now, BRI, of course, has now gone into a different kind of a, shall I say, trajectory by more like a digital diplomacy. And to that extent, they have also changed the common destiny for emerging and developing countries to saying it as a shared destiny. Why is it not possible for us, for the economics point of view, or the economy point of view, to come closer instead of really confronting our Asian neighbor? Because it's fine for America to keep on fanning the fire, because they are way out in the ocean. Nobody's going to get them so very fast or very soon or very quickly. But India is absolutely neighbor to China and Russia to that extent. If we are close to Russia, why can't we be close to China? And so much so that China has really now found that doing the Belt and Road Initiative is not going to take them very far because it's very expensive. So they have gone into a different trajectory. And they now even taking on the GPS system, which is the ICT area, because they can control the communication more than what they have been doing in the past by going into a navigation system of their own, which Pakistan has adopted. It's called Baidu. So what is it that we need to do, Dr. Das, as a country for looking ahead in trying to get our economy up and still befriend our neighbors that we have, and a major neighbor like China?
So Tarun, you had taught me how to handle a quick fire session, right? So your answer in 30 seconds, Tarun.
Okay, I think first question, no failure of foreign policy. In fact, the CII paper was taken seriously. And if you, as you referred just now to Moscow meeting, there is a Russia, India, China grouping. They meet together and they discuss common issues together. So that's working. And but that can work much better if, and I come now to your second question, our befriending China, I can give you chapter and verse, and maybe we should do it offline, of what initiatives have been taken by the government and by non-government institutions supported by the government to reach out to China. But the response has been very, very different. The response has been at the border, and unless there is security and stability at the border, there cannot be friendship. We cannot have trust towards China if they are to change the line of actual control, etc. So I won't go into detail. It's a long issue. We can discuss it separately. But I think the question really is, Mr. Datta, does China want to be friends of India? It's not whether India wants to be a friend of China. India did want to. We thought that China also wanted to, but we are not seeing that now. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Tarun. Can we now get Ritashri to bring in Indrani, please?
Absolutely. Indrani Bakshi, Senior Diplomatic Editor of Times of India, joining us from London. Mr. Kaul, you'll be happy to know she's dropping off a daughter to Imperial.
Oh, lovely. Well done, Indrani. That's perfect. Perfect. She's absolutely right for our Imperial alumni is also IBSA. Thank you, Indrani.
Excellent. She's just joining, so it'll be a while before she joins the alumni. But of course, I think that should be most welcome. Thank you, Mr. Das. As always, a fabulous session. My question is slightly different from Mr. Datta's, which is that I think one of the best things we've been doing in the last few months has been the start of the decoupling process with China. If you could sort of do a little bit of crystal ball gazing there and give us a sense of how you look at the steps the government has been taking not just on the apps, but on the projects, etc., and on the technology, etc. And how do we expect, or how do you think we should make up the shortfall in certainly things like financing of the tech sector, which Chinese companies were doing until now? So if you have, if you were to advise the government on how they can make up the shortfall on the tech sector, because the Chinese companies were financing a lot of technology startups in India. What should we be doing?
It's great to see you.
Likewise.
Are you safe and well?
Yeah, I'm in quarantine.
All good? Okay, in quarantine. Okay. Well, I'm a hardliner as far as China is concerned. We need to stand up and stand up for what we are as a country, and we need to reduce our imports from there. We've talked about that. We need to reduce Chinese investments into India. We need to reduce our dependence on China. And by the way, that will be very good for us because we need to do all that stuff ourselves anyway. Now, you talked about essentially the Indian startups which have got Chinese investments. According to my figures, and I may be way out, but you correct me if I'm wrong, it's about roughly $2 billion. $2 billion of Chinese investment in Indian startups. Indrani, this is chicken feed. What is $2 billion for national pride, for national self-respect? We should arrange a facility to take or buy the Chinese out and give the Indian startups the money, either from the State Bank of India or some other venture fund which the government can create, and make sure that those startups are successful. They have the money that they need, and they can be, really grow. So I'm not worried about, if it was $20 billion, maybe that would be a concern. But for me, I think it's 2 billion or a little more than 2 billion. For me, it's not a big deal.
Thank you.
I would be very aggressive.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Tarun. If I may now bring Mayank in with your permission, Ritashri. So Mayank Jalan is the president of the Indian Chamber of Commerce. He's also been very, and continues to be very active in CII. And he also is the chairman and MD of a very successful company called Cavinta Agro. So Mayank, would you like to come in and ask a question? And maybe very quickly, you could also say how Indian Chamber is interacting and getting great joy with the ministers in government. Mayank, over to you.
So honestly, I can actually validate everything that Mr. Das has said. The interaction between industry and the government has been unlike, we could not imagine the kind of interaction that has taken place, especially in the last 6 months. I think there was a period where I was doing 2 VCs with 2 cabinet ministers almost every day simultaneously. And my tech people in the office had a challenge where they had to set up 3 machines, where these concurrent VCs could run. I also agree with Mr. Das on the demand coming back up. I'm in the FMCG and the agriculture sector. We are seeing a robust demand coming back. In fact, the months of August and September have surprised us internally, where we had planned for a 10 to 15% degrowth, but we have actually seen growth coming, and our supply chains are not ready for growth. So I completely agree on everything that Mr. Das has shared. We are seeing that on the ground. So I just want to shift gears a little bit. And my question to you is, what do we need to do? And let's not compare ourselves to China. You know, China is what it is. You know, let's leave that aside for the time being. We need to become a powerhouse ourselves, because that's our destiny. That's a destiny that India is destined for. What would you say are the 2-3 things that the government needs to do, and do it like now, which they're not doing? And 2-3 things that we as private entrepreneurs need to take cognizance or do now, which we might not be doing. So more like forward looking, what does the government need to do, which they are not doing right now? And what do we as entrepreneurs need to do? Thank you.
So Mayank, if I may call you that, something that you may not know. When the CII was formed through a merger of the two associations, my first office at the head Indian Chamber of Commerce, Calcutta. I used to sit in India Exchange Place. I moved from the Bengal Chamber of Commerce to the Indian Chamber of Commerce, and the Bengal Chamber retained its Eastern Region office, but the central and national office was based in your chamber. I can't remember where exactly I sat, high up in the building, but so I have very fond memories of your chamber. And of course, many of your former presidents have been very, very close friends of mine. And I'm delighted to see the strength that Indian Chamber has grown to over the years. So that's one, I wanted to thank you for that and compliment you. I think government has to do one thing only. They have to stop mistrusting the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
They have to start trusting the private sector. There will be bad eggs. So you can't have everybody perfect. Everybody not going to be honest. Everybody not going to be great. But you have to trust the private sector. There is no other way. And what the political leadership need to do is to tell the administration, the officials, that that time has gone of 1950s and 60s and 70s of tying the private sector in handcuffs. And this ease of doing business is in the right direction, but it has not gone far enough. I would abolish all regulations, inspections, everything for small and medium enterprises for 3 years. Free them completely. Trust them. What will you lose? What will you lose? Allow them to grow. Allow them to self-regulate. You can have random checks once a year, once in 6 months. But so government, please trust the private sector. Now for the private sector, get off your backsides, stop whining, and take on responsibility for the country. You fulfill that trust. You are not trusted by society. You have to earn that trust. And you can't earn that trust by giving speeches. You have to earn that trust by action. So these are my 2 points.
Very good. Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you, sir.
Very, very nice, positive, and rapid fire sort of answer. I now turn to one of our youngest and very bright member of IBSA. Her name is Ashwika Kapoor. She co-chairs IBSA's Youth Council. She is a natural history filmmaker and, above all, India's youngest and indeed the only woman world over to win the Green Oscar in the global category, right? So over to you, Ashwika. Do start shooting at Tarun Das.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Your last sentence you ended the question that I had in mind completely connects with that. You said earning trust by giving speeches, and something that I'd like your opinion on, an environmental question actually that I've been thinking about regarding China for the last few days, especially now that we're all trapped in our living rooms thanks to their illegal wildlife markets. President Xi Jinping just made a statement at the UN that China aims to be a carbon neutral country by 2060. Now, personally, I'm quite skeptical of the statement, and I think, well, this may be a bit of a case of not so much a dance with the elephant, but a dance with Uncle Sam, because Uncle Sam's making all the wrong noises about the climate. So my question is, this particular statement that's just come from China, committing themselves to the environment finally, is it just politics at play, or is it, is it playing to the gallery to pacify the world, or is there really at all any intention to finally not be environmentally hostile, if I may?
Still going on.
So first of all, congratulations on getting the Green Oscar.
Thank you.
That's amazing. And you must meet the king of environment in India, that is Jamshed Godrej. Do you know him?
I don't. I'd love to.
You will meet him, because he is passionate about the environment, and he's doing amazing stuff on that.
Fantastic.
I think China probably means it. I don't think it's politics. But I think we must do it before them, no?
I agree.
We've got to do it by 2040. If they say 2060, which may slip to 2065, why don't we go for 2040? But you and all of us together have to canvass about the use of coal. Absolutely. Because coal is a very big polluter in the country. So I know we have a lot of coal, and I know that many of our companies are in the coal business, but we've got to find a different way of handling. Otherwise, future generations are in great danger. So we must be carbon neutral by 2040, if not earlier. We can do it if we can deal with the coal issue, all right? As it is, on the renewable energy issue, on solar, etc., we are going great guns since 2014. You know, we are going very, very strongly in that area. We've done amazing things in the country, positive things in that country, but we can do much more if we can get, now this recent controversy, and I know CII members are listening to me, on the environment impact assessments. Is it growth or is it environment? It has to be environment, not growth. Not growth at the cost of environment. We have to have growth with environment. We must always take care of the green agenda. Let me stop.
Yeah, and Tarun, South Korea actually made a big business by concentrating on environment, and many of their companies actually had huge growth, and the economy prospered because of that. But anyway, let me move on to Ritashri, since we are way behind time. Ritashri, Tarun had kindly agreed to stay on for maybe 10-15 minutes, but I think I've sort of passed that. So over to you, Ritashri.
Very quick questions.
Hello.
Dr. Debanjan Chakraborty. May I invite Dr. Debanjan Chakraborty? He's the head of Director of East and Northeast British Council. Debanjan, thanks for joining.
And also acting head for India, I think, at the moment. But over to you, Debanjan.
Hi, can you hear me? All right.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Dr. Das. It's been an absolutely fascinating session, and the insights are very rich and deep. I'm reading Dr. Jayashankar's book, The India Way, and there's a wonderful chapter called The Art of Disruption, which is, he's saying basically the same things you've said about the kind of lead that China has of about 15 years in terms of those deep-seated economic reforms that they brought in the late 70s, which we brought in 1991. And then the whole strategic piece around ASEAN and the Indian Ocean in the Pacific, etc. My question to you is quite different from what others have posed, because my area of expertise is largely in education in that space. How does India eliminate that difference that we have with China in the space of education and research and innovation, especially in the higher education space, and eliminate not just in numbers but also in quality and in terms of excellence?
Well, we are not going to do it. Sorry, have you finished or?
Yeah. No, that's it.
I don't think we're going to catch up with China in the next 10, 20 years in these things if we go incrementally. The only way to catch up.
I think the budget, just try switching off your sound, your voice, because there's a lot of echo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
The only way is technology. And as I mentioned, Pratham, who you must be knowing about Pratham, is doing remarkable things in terms of carrying primary education to children in the rural areas. They are now working in 10,000 villages with children. Of course, this has to be multiplied many times over, but Pratham is not the only organization working. There are many others working. They are the largest in this field. So I think instead of worrying about comparing with China, let's focus on getting our act together for ourselves. And I think there's a determination in the non-governmental sector to carry education to the farthest reaches of India. And I think in that, organizations like British Council, and there are NGOs like Room to Read, etc., who are doing great work, in this area. So whether they are setting up libraries in villages or they are just training teachers, there are all kinds of things happening across the country. We need to scale it up more so that we get a faster.
With your permission, Rajiv, and can I just ask a follow-up question on that? The Pratham, Room to Read, I work very closely with both of them. Do you see some possibility in the new education policy that has been unveiled in bringing in that kind of quantitative disruption?
I haven't gone into detail of the government policy on education, so I would not be the right person to answer that question. I shouldn't make a guess.
We have
Rajiv, you're on mute. Rajiv, you're on mute.
Mr. Kaul, you're on mute. I just saw.
Over to you then. Over to you.
Okay, last question.
I think Priyam is joining us from Vizag.
Priyam, would you like to just switch on your video and ask the last question before we kind of move on? Priyam?
One of our young members, Tarun, Sanjay Budhia's daughter.
I know the father.
Priyam, are you there or? I'm going to go ahead and ask her question and then I'll see if she can come on. She had sent it to me because she was traveling, Mr. Das.
Yes, good evening. So should I go ahead with the question?
Yes, over to you, Priyam.
Good evening. So my question is that under the Trump administration, we've seen a very strong Indo-China, anti-China sentiments, and be it trade or be it tariff imposition. So, and companies are also relocating and transferring their bases to countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, India, as well as Indonesia for their supply and production bases. The elections is just around the corner on the 3rd of November. So my question is, if instead of President Trump, Mr. Joe Biden is sworn in as the president, in your view, what do you think about this, US-China sentiment? Will it continue? And how will this affect the Indo-US trade relations in the next 5 years? Thank you.
It will continue. There's a national view in America, which is fairly unanimous. Democrats are on the same page. I'll be brief because we've run out of time.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to, Mr. Kaul, your call? I know there's been tremendous amount of questions coming in. Do you want me to combine 3 and just ask one question and then?
If Tarun agrees, Tarun, do you agree?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'm going to very quickly combine a few questions on overall on the manufacturing. Reference Journal Narasimhan asks, how do we increase the percentage of manufacturing in our GDP? Ravi Prasad, Executive Committee of IBSA, asked, do you think manufacturing will move from China to India in any significant extent? And then Suparna Panti follows up with, what does India need to do to ensure that companies moving away from China and come to India? So I just very quickly.
I think, General, we have to make it easier for companies to set up in India, which means permissions, approvals, and all of that, and this has to be done much faster. The second thing is availability of land, but there is a solution to that. What the government is now doing for the Japanese is that they are acquiring the land, say in Nimrana, for a bunch of Japanese companies, or in a place called Jhajjar in Haryana, also for Japanese companies, so that they can all be together in one area. So this is the way to go. It's very difficult for individual companies to acquire land. There are many challenges in doing that. But the small townships, which government is now making available to investors, is a very good way to go. And that is going to bring up a lot of new manufacturing and a lot of new greenfield investments. We have to make ourselves more attractive, answering that other question about China to India. We just have to make ourselves more attractive. We have to be easier to do business in. As I said earlier, trust the private sector.
Thank you, Mr. Das. Mr. Kaul, did you have a special request for Mr. Das?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a request on behalf of IBSA, Tarun, and I'll be extremely grateful if you could be gracious enough to accept it. In IBSA Council, when they heard that you were coming as the first speaker on my year of presidentship, it was unanimously decided to request you to become our very first honorary member of IBSA.
Oh, wow.
So we are on behalf of IBSA, right? So we'll be extremely grateful if you could accept it. And this is a request from our entire executive council of IBSA.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rajiv. I'll be honored.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure. You've got so many big honors that this is a small thing. It's not an honor. It's a request. And let me assure you, you know me, I keep harassing you thereafter. But thank you for accepting, Tarun. Very gracious of you indeed. Thank you. Can I request our Vice President, Dr. Hirak Sen, to kindly offer the vote of thanks and concluding remarks?
President Rajive Kaul, our respected guest of honor, Mr. Tarun Das, the dignitaries of the Consulate Corps, valued guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to have this opportunity of making the concluding remarks and of proposing the vote of thanks on this occasion. President Rajiv, you have allotted me 5 minutes. Also, I know that it is getting closer to the dinner time. So I assure you that I will keep my comments to within the time limit. First, I'll make my concluding remarks. It was amazing and encouraging to learn that Mr. Tarun Das is so upbeat about India's future outlook, both in defense and in economy and finance. And I didn't know that he's a hardliner. He himself said that. And I find as usual that he is very direct and succinct. So now I'll try, instead of touching upon many points. I'll try and make a couple of broad points as the concluding remarks. Some 11 months ago in October 2019, at the balmy beaches of Mamallapuram, after being feted lavishly by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, China's President Xi famously said that the Chinese dragon and the Indian elephant must not fight each other, but dance together. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that this dance is intricate, and these intricate footsteps have continued for decades. But currently, there is a pause in that dance. The dragon and the elephant currently stand eyeball to eyeball. Maybe the dragon has blinked ever so imperceptibly because the dragon finds somewhat unexpectedly that this time around the elephant is nimble-footed. This evening's conversation indicates that the dance will resume sooner or later because neither country can afford a war now. China has its internal problems, and externally the rest of the world is angry with China's mishandling of COVID-19 and with its belligerent expansionist attitude. The world wants to ostracize China. Trade wars have begun with China. India, this panel thinks, will gain, along with Vietnam and Indonesia, from the trade war with China. On the other hand, currently India is beleaguered by COVID-19 and is in deep economic downturn. So therefore, it is an unpropitious moment for any country, either country, to go to war. So I believe this is one of the main takeaways from this evening's scintillating conversation. The other points that came out, I'll touch briefly. The carbon neutral India by 2040, as Mr. Tarun Das mentioned, is a landmark target. And education and research in India, both need to improve. Dr. Manmohan Singh have been on this issue, and it should improve. Currently, the investment is only 0.6%. And for education to improve, as Mr. Das has said repeatedly, we need organizations like Protham. These are the other main outcomes of the conversation. So be that as it may, ladies and gentlemen, I now come to my pleasant task of proposing the vote of thanks. I, on behalf of the Indo-British Scholars Association, on behalf of iLEAD, and on my personal behalf, express our deep appreciation to Mr. Das for sparing his valuable time in leading the conversation. We are elated that you have accepted the honorary membership of IBSA. Sir, we are incredibly honored to have you within the folds of IBSA, and would hope that you will mentor IBSA and grace many of our future occasions. We are grateful to Your Excellencies, the Consul Generals and diplomats who have graced the occasion this evening. Your Excellencies, we will be honored to have you amidst us in our future events, but in front of the camera. The preeminent panelists, Dr. Jamshed Irani, Mr. Subodh Bhargav, Mr. Pradeep Chopra, Mr. Shekhar Datta, Ms. Indrani Bagchi, Mr. Mayank Jalan, Dr. Devanjan Chakravarti, and our own Ms. Ashwika Kapoor and Priyam Budhia. Each one of you have enriched us and enriched the deliberations with your insightful interventions. We thank you wholeheartedly. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have been backed by a team of dedicated members of the Executive Committee of IBSA and by members of iLEAD who worked tirelessly to make this event happen. We applaud their work behind the scene. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, I propose a hearty vote of thanks to our guest of honor, Mr. Tarun Das, and ask you to carry it by pressing the thumbs up button on your screen.
As
the adage goes, saying thank you is more than good manners, it is also good spirituality. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jamshed.
Thank you, Tarun.
Everybody.
Thanks, Rajiv. Thank you, everyone. All the best. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jamshed. Bye.